Greg Rosenthal here says it's weird to cover a Cowboys team so clearly built around defense. This group is loaded, and anything less than a third straight finish within the top 5 in defensive DVOA rankings will be a letdown. This DVOA is a much better way to quantify how good you are than yards or points or any of the rudimentary counting numbers. And the Cowboys have been great at DVOA. My question is, do you agree with going strong on defense again? I think trying to win with defense can be a very good idea. It seems harder to pull off while also having a good enough offense. And I thought their defense was good enough. I thought the bigger concern the last 2 times they were in the playoffs was not being able to score. They've shut the Niners down with what they had, and it wasn't ideal. I like the pick of Mozzie Smith. I do, but, going into this one, so that's my question. Do you agree with going strong on defense again and trying to maybe lead into a new defensive era with this Cowboys franchise?
I mean, I understand it. I still think that you need to have, your defense wasn't your problem. Your defense can only be so good. At some point, your offense has to score more than 12 points.
In that isolated game, you're 100% right. In the playoffs.
Yeah, and the last 2 times your season ended, it was both to San Francisco, and it was both looking directly at your offense and saying you were the problem. And so I guess you can keep trying to make your defense better to offset your poor offense, but I think we're living in an offensive world. The rules are geared toward offenses.
Yeah.
And defenses, we've seen, they can have some ups and downs. Even though the grand scheme of last year, you had a really good defense, you had patches of your season where it wasn't quite there. So if you lose a couple of guys on your defense, your offense now cannot pick up the slack for you.
I don't think so. I don't think Cooks fixes much.
He's another weapon that certainly you needed on the offense, but
it was a no-brainer move. It was a great move.
It was one they had to make,
but it's not enough.
They needed to add another wide receiver. They're going to implement, I think, a lot more tight end heavy, big formations. I mean, now you've got 3 tight ends that they like, and you've got 2 that I think can be pretty darn good pass catchers as well. The other one, the rookie in Schoonmaker, maybe he's got some untapped potential that they see there as well, but he's going to be the best blocker of the bunch. So, they still led the league in points per game. The offense last year in the regular season was fine, but there's an issue when you get to the playoffs, and that's why they moved on from Kellen Moore, right? You needed to make a change, and they've made those changes. We just have no idea what those changes are going to look like. How are these coaches going to do? Brian, you've talked about that with the heavy turnover, but I don't mind addressing the defense and making it more of a strength there. I don't think that's a bad decision.
Yeah, to me, when I have full confidence in anything they do defensive related. When you start to talking about adding players and using players, I'm a broken record. I just don't know. And we talked about it on the Love of the Star podcast, just the amount of turnover, and that's the thing that I worry. Maybe they will figure this thing out, but maybe it's like, oh, well, hey, there's flashes of it getting better.
Yeah.
But then it's 2-3 years from now getting better or the best it could be. And I don't know if Mike McCarthy has 2 or 3 more years. If this
plan doesn't work, you won't have one.
Exactly. If all of a sudden, if they go backwards on offense, and then all of a sudden it turns into Dan Quinn and those guys are having to bail them out every game because they're not getting they're not scoring enough or holding the ball long enough.
I think Mike knows that. I think he's like, it's going to be my way or I'll go retire.
I think you've dead on nailed it right there. I think Mike McCarthy's to the point in time in his career, it's like, listen, this owner is giving me a lot of crap.
Okay, we have Greg Rosenthal here. Thoughts on this Cowboys team? He's doing a roster breakdown of all the NFC East teams, has some takeaways of where they are now. And some great truckwreck.com fan text coming in. We've seen you can have a top 5 scoring offense. You get shut down by a great defensive team like San Francisco. I don't think the scoring offense, that's when Troy's talking about the stats. And he knows stats from the regular season can be misleading. We're a top 5 offense. How do you show up and not be able to be game, at least, against a top 5 defense? That shouldn't be the case. Typically, great offenses go up against pretty dang good defenses in the playoffs and still figure out a way to put the ball in the end zone a bunch of times. You're like, what happened to this defense? Well, they came up against a contender offense. That's what contender offenses do. That's what you got to build for. So if you're great in the regular season, I don't think you can bank that as, hey, our offense is good enough. You got to look at the results. And, even when they had great offensive players, they laid an egg in the first half against Green Bay twice. Had to have good comebacks. Okay, take number 2 from Rosenthal. Micah Parsons not only leads the best edge rushing starting duo in football, but the Cowboys feature one of the best pair of backups in Sam Williams and Dorrance Armstrong. It's freaking loaded there on that pass rush. Too deep for sure. Those could be good starters. Like Williams and Armstrong would have been much better starters at pass rush that the Cowboys had in 14 and 16. But what's better to you guys, the pass rushers or the secondary on this Cowboys team?
Ooh, I mean, they kind of go hand in hand, right? I mean, you want the pass rush is going to help your secondary. I think
your pass rush, I think,
your
is
best
better than
player
your
is Micah, and he's a pass rusher. I mean, I think both are good, but I think the pass rush should be stronger.
It is incredible that how good this secondary's been. I don't think Gilmore still has enough, but if Gilmore would have a resurgent season at 33 and be close to a Pro Bowl level, and Diggs has an All-Pro year, and you have 3 really good safeties.
Deron Bland's really kind of looking to set that over the top.
Yeah, I think if you ask me of a veteran player that might have lost his job this year, Jordan Lewis. I think Jordan Lewis is, whether it's salary cap reasons or whatever. I think Deron Bland is going to be your nickel corner.
He earned that role. I will say this, just going back real quick to the team building. I do think the Cowboys have done an excellent job over the last couple of years of making a more well-rounded football team. It used to be they were all offense. The defense stunk. And now we're talking about, is their identity as a defensive football team? I still don't think the offense is bad. Your 3 wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup. I think Cooks is much better than it sounds like, Gavin, you think. I mean, the dude's had 6 1,000-yard seasons. He's been productive everywhere he goes.
I just think Gallup's better than you think. Yeah.
And that's fair. Yeah. And I do expect Michael Gallup to get to closer to where he was 3 years ago versus where he was last year. I think he bounces back. I don't think he has 400 yards this year. I think you're closer to hopefully the 800 to 900 yard range for Michael Gallup. But those 3 receivers, certainly do you have to have a Jalen Tolbert step up, which they think he's going to do. You're 3 tight ends deep now. You've got Tony Pollard. The offensive line, I think, is solid, but they need to figure out left guard. Offensively, they're still a pretty good football team. And I think they've done an excellent job of, you don't have a weakness right now on either side of the football. But the big question is, in the playoffs, can you find a way to get over the hump and not be limited to 17 or 12 damn points and win that game?
Yeah, I don't know if they do have a weak spot. Maybe it could be, though, at off-ball linebacker. And Rosenthal writes, I'm only listing one off-ball linebacker to highlight the Cowboys' secondary depth. Damone Clark will take a lot of the snaps Anthony Barr grabbed last year. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes, yeah, and the linebacker spot for this particular team is not one. Now, I mean, if Van Der Esch gets injured, then that becomes an issue. But Dan Quinn wants to play with more secondary pieces. He wants to have, like, Jaron Kearse is basically a linebacker. You've added Overshown now. We'll see how he does in his rookie year. But the way Dan Quinn likes to play defense, there's less emphasis on needing a stable of inside linebackers than maybe the next team.
100%, because you got 3 safeties there, Wilson and Marquise Bell, who can also play that hybrid role.
How about backup quarterback Cooper Rush appeared to receive scant interest in free agency? Why do you guys think that was? Why does nobody want Cooper Rush? Guy went 4-1.
We heard the story about the time that he was trying to get to Vegas, maybe to sign with them. He was on a way to a visit, then the weather didn't allow him to fly, and that was really the one opportunity he had. And what happened the next day, he said, hey, that's a sign. I need to be here. And that was really all it was. We kind of thought that maybe the Chargers would step up, because of Kellen Moore and stuff. But no, not
those
at all.
wins did not impress anybody.
Nope.
Teams saw right through that. Your defense carried you to 4 wins, and then as soon as you're everything. Like, you got lucky with a lot of this stuff in terms of turnovers. Cooper Rush had a lot more interceptable passes in those games that didn't happen, and then it all came to a head in the Philadelphia game when the interceptions that were being dropped in the previous weeks, they weren't getting dropped. All of a sudden, you lose.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the receivers, Brian.
Real quick, do you think they have a weakness at running back?
Cowboys?
Yeah.
No.
I don't.
No, Tony Pollard's going to be good. That's not a catastrophic injury that blows up a joint. That just broke a bone.
Player for player.
Tony Pollard's one of the best 5 running backs in the NFL.
I think Ronald Jones is a fine number 2, and I think Deuce Vaughn's very good. And Malik Davis, we'll see what they get out of him.
I think it's an issue. I do, but I don't necessarily have the faith that you're going to get the exact same Tony Pollard that you had last year. I love Tony Pollard last year. He absolutely was that guy. Yeah. And hopefully he just picks up right where he left off. But after Tony Pollard, you're talking about Ronald Jones, who what does he done. I mean,
Kind of been a journeyman man a little bit.
Well, he was a number one running back in Tampa Bay.
And then where did we just get him from? Was he on?
He was with the Chiefs.
He's with the Chiefs.
But they were stacked at running back, so he didn't get much playing time.
What do we mean by stacked at running back? Like, they had Pacheco, who arrived in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Jerick McKinnon, like, those aren't, I wouldn't consider
Clyde
Jerick
Edwards-Helaire,
McKinnon.
who they took in the first round, they were going to play him over him.
Okay, but he's been a disappointment. Like, to say that the Chiefs are stacked at running back, I think is a huge overstatement, and Ronald Jones couldn't crack it. So, I mean, I don't necessarily believe in him. I'm hopeful for Tony Pollard, but is he going to play all 17 games, even if he is himself? And now we're depending on Deuce Vaughn, who I'm excited about.
Right.
But you got him in the 6th round. Every team had 6 opportunities to draft him. I think there's a real chance here that your running back position is a problem. And when CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Cooks goes down, here comes Michael Gallup, who's going to need to be elevated. I don't have faith in him. And all of a sudden, you're dealing with a giant weapons issue, which has been my whole problem with this entire offseason.
And a robust Cowboys conversation here in the GBag Nation as we go around the NFC East. Thank you, guys. Those are good takes.
Well, I want Walchuk can rebuttal because I think they're damn good takes, but I think I could very well be wrong.
I think it's something we haven't talked about a lot.
Right, and
I'd
look,
like to say I feel like I've championed that pretty hard.
If Pollard isn't healthy, then I'm more with you. But you also talk about how you don't want to take a running back in the first round. You can find running backs anywhere. We've seen running backs get signed that were undrafted free agents that come in and perform, and now you want to say the Cowboys have a running back issue. I don't think it's an issue.
I'm not saying it's an unsolvable issue. But
I think Malik Davis, if they needed to turn to be a bell cow for a game, he's going to be able to be productive for you. I think they're fine.
They very well might be, but Malik Davis they had a chance to turn to him and they didn't in the game that mattered most when they needed weapons more desperately than anybody.
This is a completely different season. For whatever reason, he wasn't mentally prepared to play that game.
I don't think he was at all. And they weren't confident to put him in there. I think
Ronald Jones has been productive in the NFL. You can go back and look at his numbers when he played at Tampa Bay. He had some good moments there. I think they've got enough guys so they can get the job done.
I think this is funny. 972. They have an issue at running back. Mark my words, they're going to be calling Zeke back.
Oh, geez. Now that I would say no.
That would hurt.
Tony Pollard has the same injury as Dak, and Dak's not the same. It's not the same injury. I mean, you're talking about a compound fracture that broke the bone, that annihilated all the ligaments and tendons in Dak's foot, and Tony Pollard had a broken leg. You know, those are things you come back from. On the Giants, New York set out to get deeper and faster this offseason. They did it. I love how quickly Shine and Dayball have transformed this roster. Then again, it still may be the least talented group in the division, writes Rosenthal. Do you agree with that, Brian?
I'd say so, yeah. I do.
Going to have to coach them back in?
I think the Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, and Giants will probably be, Giants are doing a better job getting players.
Philly, he says they look better than the group that averaged 34.7 points in the playoffs. They added Penny Swift and Mariota in their backfield. He's saying, I picked the Eagles to win the Super Bowl before last season because they had the best roster, and this group is better now, so I'll probably do it again. I don't know if they're better. I think I need to see them play and have some of these young players actually come together. I think they have potential to maybe be better, but, man, they lost a lot.
We'll see what Cam Jurgens does at guard for them, having to play right guard. That's going to be something different for them.
And then Washington, it's the roster you'd expect from a Ron Rivera team that won 7 to 8 games in each of the last 3 years. They profile similarly in 2023, unless Howell is one of the stories of the season, which I'm not ruling out, writes Rosenthal.